So the perfection of the heart of perfection of wisdom sutra prostrated 3 noble rare sublime ones. Thus today, here one time the Bhagwan was dwelling on Mass, the Vulture's Mountain in Rajguru, together with a great community of monks and a great community of bodhisattvas. At that time, the bodhisattva was absorbed in the concentration on the categories of phenomena called profound perception. Also at that time, the bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara looked upon the very practice of the profound perfection of wisdom and beheld these 5 arahats also as empty of inherent nature. Then, through the power of the Buddha, the Venerable Sariputta said this to the bodhisattva Mahasattva Avalokiteshvara: how should any son of the lineage train who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom? He said that, and the bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara said this to the Venerable Shariputra. Shariputra, any son of the lineage or daughter of the lineage who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom should look upon it like this, correctly and repeatedly beholding these 5 aggregates, also as empty of inherent nature. Form is empty. Emptiness is form. Emptiness is not other than form. Form is also not other than emptiness. In the same way, feelings, discrimination, compositional factors, and consciousness are empty. Shariputra, likewise, all phenomena are emptiness without characteristic, unproduced, unceased, stainless, not without stain, not deficient, not fulfilled. Shariputra, therefore, in emptiness there is no form, no feeling, no discrimination, no compositional factors, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no visual form, no sound, no odor, no taste, no object of touch, and no phenomena. There is no eye element, and so on up to including mind element, and no mental conscious element. There is no ignorance, no extinction of ignorance, and so on and up to including no aging and death, and no extinction of aging and death. Similarly, there is no suffering or origination, cessation, and path. There is no exalted wisdom, no attainment, and also no non-attainment. Shariputra, therefore, because there is also no attainment, bodhisattvas rely and dwell in the perfection of wisdom, the mind, without obscuration and without fear. Having completely passed beyond the error, they reach the end point of nirvana. All the Buddhas who dwell in the 3 times also manifestly completely awaken to unsurpassable, perfect, complete enlightenment in reliance on the perfection of wisdom. Therefore, the mantra of the perfection of wisdom, the mantra of the great knowledge, the unsurpassed mantra, the mantra equal to the unequal, the mantra that thoroughly pacifies all suffering, should be known as truth, since it is not false. The mantra of the perfection of wisdom is declared Hayata Katikati, Parakati, Parasamkati, Buddhi, Soha. Sariputta, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, should train in the profound perfection of wisdom like that. Then the Bhagwan rose from that concentration and commended the Bodhisattva, saying, and a short mandala. A ground anointed with perfume strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the 4 continents, the sun, and the moon. I imagine as a Buddha land and offer it. May all transmigratory beings enjoy this pure land. Lama. So recite the praise to Manjushri. Bang Lama. Homage to my Lama and protector and Venerable Manjushri, who holds at his heart a scripture symbolic of his seeing all as it is, whose pure genius shines like the sun unclouded by the 2 obscurations, who with compassion, like a father for his only child, teaches with 60-fold eloquence. All beings imprisoned in cyclic existence, groping in the darkness of ignorance and overwhelmed by suffering. You, whose thunder-like proclamation of the perfection of wisdom arouses us from the stupor of our afflictions and frees us from the iron chains of karma, who wields wisdom's sword, vanquishing the darkness of ignorance, hewing down our every sprout of suffering. You who are primordially pure, gone to the end of the 10 grounds, complete embodiment of every excellence, whose princely body is graced with the 112 adornments. O Manjushri, to you I bow, to dispel the darkness of my mind. Amarapasanati. With brilliance of your wisdom, O compassionate one, illuminate the darkness of my mind's confusion. Grant me the light of self-assured intelligence.
Sanje chedan soje chena Allah shanju bhado dane jago daye jinso nyeben sonam je dola benje sanje ndo bo sanje chedan soje Chanchu bardo dane nyagun chen daye jinson gebe sonam jen dala benje sanje rubara sho sanje chedan loye chenam la chanchu bardo dane jaso 다예 진소 예베 소놈 진도라 편지 산진 로버쇼 돈이 저도 주변 넘어지지 선서 같이 되죠 차나베 뭐 되는 저도 소원도 저도 라자마 소노로 하고나 다음에 개선한다고 영화 저거 타게져 봐요 세제 신년 난다 차서 Padenza Lama Rimpoche Ndage Nyingirbe Me Den Shuala Kane Chimbingwane Jodone Oson Doji Udo Zero Hola Suta Tanda Kasan Di Karsagore Simji Tukwa Di Ngomazu Ungele Ya Panyan Dawa Chabeke Ani Da Sherabi Labati Ani Nyamnengi Zolo Sungu Yoris Karachinisena Ani Maranzu Gita Chigi Nyamne Jimbala Sobadaza Tamje 간제지가 소소기다 소놈 공배로 땅야게 냠랭 가수지 치기여나 아니 시럽게 믿다마되나 아니 지기 강체바 탐제다 가르서 그래 직딩기 직딩나마 신 팀로야 손로지마도 콜라 타르비교로 누구 믿을 선배 아니 시럽기 아니 라바디 쪼로 송제 엔디기 시럽이 심베 토네 아니 내가 저기 최냠낸 체지 고주 쭉 톱나 아니 니마 다른네 송데 아니 지게 코알레 타야기 레가지 제야디 고주야 라기 여자 아니 단다 특제데 나로라야 시럽기 믹스 시럽라 믹단데 바스 셴 탐제라 믹단 미덴바 시럽기 단다 퍼진 하마 탐지 아니 차르벨람라야 트블 치니데스 어도르스 지제 숨바나시 아니 아란주 남샤 균드네 최냠nen이 제베가라 아니 저장가 아란주 가상이 니마 당번을 송데 아니 니마 당번을 송데 안고 그 민지에게 남다 표시에게 남세 등에 바로도 냠nen이 나로라야 창고도 창고면도 삼바다에 개천부를 해주고 신체제 대 운동대 예.
And so here, we were engaged in looking at the 6th chapter of Chandrakirti's Entering the Middle Way, and particularly here where it talks about the training in the training in wisdom, and taking the importance of taking training in wisdom as one of our main practices. And this is important because whatever forms of practice that we engage in, the activities related to our Dharma practice that we engage in, they will certainly help to accumulate and increase merit. But if we're not careful to conjoin that to practice, to have that practice influence to with the understandings of wisdom, then they will always lead us. Those merits will always lead as a cause back in a kind of into the world into the world of samsara, and won't act as a liberating cause to liberate us from samsara. So when we are able to infuse our practice, or these other practices, also with the underpinned with wisdom, then that's when really our Dharma practice begins, and our work then is to, and we work then towards attaining liberation from samsara. So it says about having the eyes of that seeing through the eyes of wisdom, relying on the wise of wisdom, and not any, those looking through things with the eyes of wisdom as being incredibly important in order to guide us, to lead us towards liberation. So then, so when we're normally doing Dharma practice, we have to remember that what I mentioned at the beginning about the two different paths, the liberating path and the ripening path, and making sure that our practice is a complete practice, that it has sort of fulfills all of the criteria for being a liberating path.
똥번이기 tamam 아니 시럽이 라바티 조 아니 땅아 좀아서네 맨 손으로지 인도 잠베 맨리아 아니 맨 산토기 삼로디 아니 소수기 줄래 년리아 딘지기 맨딜 대단 총배 안 나자 딘지지 여데메 나자 딘지기 날니 아니 미슈베로 지 두드민도 딩야버도 응안도 로고야지 인도 잠베 냐버도 하란 저기 똥번이 땀라야 지기 태매다 가보당 이제 요딩이 지금 미지기 냐버도 디커 네바치 공부도 당해야 돼 가르쳐 그랬어요 세상가 말하는 중 지기 뒤이네 직관에 도네 간네 내당 간대지가 베이나야 아니 생비 소지게 나로라 냐버도 아니 지기 년중기 삼베심 토바지 년중기 삼바 점마만 임바도 연구 말해 돼 아니야 점마치래체 점마대양 아니 탄다 동행긴 날왜 심정인다며 마 동행이 릉신전도 내외 심정인다며 어디다 되거든요 바로 또 양의 양보 땅거에 뺏게 참으래요.
And so we also have to sort of, think of ourselves in a context of, in the context that we are in terms of sort of seeking out this liberation, the path to liberation, the liberating path, and having the developing our understanding of the emptiness, and also listening to the instructions about emptiness and wisdom, and then thinking of these instructions as a medicine to counteract our sickness. So the looking at the illness that we have, so to speak. So this is the medicine. So we have to look at the illness that we have, and whether we're able to stand to be able to bear this the illness that we have, and then thinking of these instructions, thinking of these instructions as the medicine to counteract that illness. But we, however much we have a sort of, have joy and interest and faith in the instructions, it's important to be able to sort of increase the potential to achieve these things. And so whatever kind of situation we're in, whether positive things are happening to us, negative things are happening to us, difficult or positive or difficult situations, we always have to have within our mind has to be always infused with the sense of renunciation. Now, having an uncontrived renunciation would be very difficult, but having this real sense that we are being, we're oppressed by suffering, that we're a being in the nature of suffering. So holding that kind of discriminational perspective in our mind is very important, so that it's not a uncontrived renunciation, but a kind of contrived renunciation to understand that we are, a being in the nature of suffering.
Len kar gyab thu ma res lam na ni ba di ma dunghe gi rang shin chen na la duges ma dunghe gi rang shin chen ribe ni phung bu de dunghe gi rang shin chen ribe ta til chöbe de len zaw ni gyab thu ta dil sam lo ma shu tang gu yor che jang ga dunghe gi rang shin chen le da nyu mong gi xiang chen se di ta dil ko ya go ji char ma thu na 아니 배전 최제 것도 가버려요. 아니 최강 제가 담제 아니 직된 뒤는 기부대에 탑시선으로 봐시. 배나직 잠도 지 쉬어야 돼양 체디나로 봐지 바르제도 어떻게 선으로 봐지. 몰람지 자베 이내 다산이나니 지글라가다 지 소소의 도교 된다야 야구용 투야지. 아니 심전 담제야 도교 야구 제도야 대다 담제려야 내 나자매와 된 직딩기 나로려야 기부용아야 그 몰람지 마도 아니 레다 뇨몽기 샹완레 파 털로야 지다 아니 동행기 랑신진 텔렌 털토야 그 몰람데 자와 니네 리그 메두잠베 네버도 나란 쪽에 동료도비 셔럽 생얘기 텔려야 대바직냐 깨발라 네버도 응원도 로고얘기 다 지게 삼로 땅고에디 아니 잡았도 지그 동해 세게 다 텔려야 로치 장도 버지다 아니 과야고 차도 버지 좋나 아니 최 마치 까면도 좋다 자에게다 들이 삼로 들려서 들이도 와
And so we can sort of divide the sort of situations up into two in terms of do we the first question would be, do we experience suffering or not? And of course, we can say that, okay, we do experience suffering, but then of course our answer to that will be, when things are going well for us, when we're in a good situation, then actually we kind of we will we may actually sort of think that we don't experience suffering. So the second sort of way of looking at it is to think, well, this phrase that we're a being in the nature of suffering, we're a being sort of oppressed by suffering, or in the nature of suffering, that our very aggregates of body and mind are actually in the nature of suffering. And so then thinking about this perspective, that we're a being in such a condition, that we're a being which is under the sway of karma and mental afflictions. And if we only bring the first perspective, but are not able to bring the second perspective, that we're a being in the nature of suffering, then really it's hard to say that we've actually begun our dharma practice. What we're really doing, in a sense, is employing sort of methods and ways of thinking, which, in order to just bring happiness in the kind of samsaric world, and the same can be said for refuge and our thoughts about even the thoughts about the welfare of other sentient beings. If we're not careful, that all we're doing is thinking about achieving some sort of kind of happier condition with it, but still within the world. And instead, we have to develop the idea that we have to find ways to get free from the common mental afflictions, and then therefore, on the basis of that, developing faith in the wisdom, the wisdom, particularly the wisdom understanding the nature of reality, and then and before so we have to train ourselves in that, to understand about the pervasive condition suffering, to train in its instructions, and to get a good understanding of pervasive condition suffering. And then we can say that our approach to the Dharma is really becoming a real Dharma practice.
얘기한게 까난 거를 시장가 아니 남 동행 동해 다 동해 가도라면 누구 교회 동해 실렌다 동해 망보징 아주 민dio 망보 시부지도 와 아니 대다 탐지 용사 대다 탐지의 용사 동해 자와데 가르래 라뷰 잠베 말한주 흉당 빼자당 아니야 삼삼 숭주에 된다는 망보징 아주 거대게 알았으라나 한 동해 정서 자와데 바땅진리 녀모레스 바주고주데 마도 그것도 그라 아주 마소네 가리기 세우랬다 눈주 지기 고중에도 망보 요래데 크둥아 졸네 쟁인데 가르레 제제 조고조네 깨제티가 용나 아니 동해 용사데 자와데 아 깨와드레샤스 디 사메알야 삼 데스 람사 사메아다 레레 사메 주요데 삼레 고치 당는 미스벨로 숙충부제치 아 깨와네야 노르샤슬라마타 디저 자와 니니 켈레마 되치다 아 깨와네야도 노메스 아직 된 디날레야도 노메스 예, 들어봐. 얘네 까니 가르레스도 잠베 달래다 요모다 드조레스 야스로치. 아니 되네 디 탑시 매버스열 가르치 내가 독세 되지만 또 자원인의 생부 소리지게 나라 켈레마 도야지. 동반이에 또스도 켈렌 도와래. 그 미다발레 또스 켈렌 도와라 가지. 다이네 켈 정보지니 켈렌 마토야디 차바 두지기 동엔 세데 조 관례셔서 아주 깨발래야들이 셨다. 깨발래야 거란 나오셨을라도 다 딜미스별로 슈슈무시기를 가죠. 다디 녀마트 베스로지어. 키란졸로데 용구이미 미신된 알든데 총소. 대단된데 세도 잡베된 갱이데 송타베 쇼라네. 삼로 단계 모라나로야 마 노블링가네야 ngarantesabato ya sajatiri ya meglogan chudu chuju sigsama simjiya rowa moranalo maji wishucha 제고 직 때문에 단에래 칼라저 산에래 뭐지 위슈샤 다때는 산이네 지게 최 지금 관련해야다 아니 비 정면 가정선 디 리마인더를 셨어 다디 빌딩아 남샤준도 컴포트 시죠 얼바 기비시고 근데 다 딜려 땅도 스타티 아 디까냐 가로죠 드라지 유지디스 인플루언스 되고가 아시네 다디 섬라야 와서 당도 선배 당원에 최야고 지 유다고 지 고지 주고 요나 디 캐말은 안 해서 그렇지 디 캐런 살라라니 시네 지금 레망보 땅고도 선배는 지긴 최제디 파지 레 땅나마도全国 쪽투서 말해서 다 삼보도 어디 레도 디 인도 선배디 다 용사대니 디레지 레원들 아니 개와 간데스 가고래 세도니 개와 가고에 최도니 최슈고였어 다 가르슈고요 세도 선배니 레다뇨 모니세 만나 개와 가 레다뇨 모니세라 다도 선배 등진기 자와로 송되어서 대단 증당어서 예배 로지 마덴발라 때매버 서투에 매버데 갸니 갸담바 이지 녜네 동고된리 이지 녜당들이 디니 차비 쇼라 아니 시네 싱부 소리지게 나로라 아니 개발라데 순데마순 아니 가르스 야 순낭 니버데 가르기 그랬어요 선배 춘낭 춘낭 덴버송 아탕체에서 당 아탕체에서 써야 돼 그베 나와데 리지를 때는 아 레다 요몽 샤완 짱냥 로징 아탕체에서 써야 다디 nen주 아주 nen주버게 nen주베게 계절에 냠len 책 토버지니 계절에 어디 리지 니버들레 아니 신행아 송주 샴바 쉐 주투고 말해 아 라마지 왕지는 게 연애디 슈가 도투고 말해 아니 가리 슈가도 그랬어도 다 왕단데 저 장데 사보데 시고를 자신을 시고를 알 단다 가르고 있어도 아 동분이 때문에 땀지 고도 생아 등진 뒤에 담아지 슈고도 스타 디장냥 제가 로데 얘기니 뭐지 레기 있어요 아니 최 간제지 양간 로베이네 디나로를 등진 뒤에 이게 송주의 라메 갖는 것도 세 디제가 로데 있어요 어제 장가 까담벨라마 저 계라침을 쳐야 돼 가르스는 나 그냥 내나는 계라침을 잡아래도 다 저거 전주고 있습니다 동반 얘기 냠랜데 낭당데 투모모 입지 대양 어디를 당할 샤박 보면 동안 메다발 슈자고요 시제 연직 용예지 마 샤박开메동안 당매들 슈자고요 시제 그 장만 시부지 배 랍자들 견 통예지도 선배 세상 까담배기 최 냠랜 낭당데 양 모두 돼야지 용고에 그 찍들이샤
And so, in terms of this all pervasive conditioned suffering, so gaining a good understanding, the importance of gaining a good understanding of pervasive conditioned suffering. Then at one point, I was able to sort of ask again one of my teachers about this, and the about what to about the pervasive condition suffering and what to do about it. And he mentioned that, of course, he mentioned that all of the unwanted, the very manifest unwanted sufferings that we have, such as the suffering of suffering and the suffering and the sufferings associated with the suffering of change, all of these things that we manifestly don't want, actually all of them stem from basic condition suffering, from that's the sort of source out of which all of those spring. And in the text and what it, in the text and the great texts and treatises, what's being said is that these all the unwanted sufferings will stem from the self-grasping, this grasping into an existent self. And then if we look, the usual answer that we say, is that we look to the cause of all those things and we talk of self-grasping. But if we looked in a more direct way, again, my teacher was saying about what causes us to be in this condition, then he says that the main root of all of those is actually being born, birth itself. But for us, that sounds like a very uncomfortable thing to listen to. It's something that's hard to get a handle on, to say in some way that it's a mistake to be born, or for us to say, oh, my coming into this world, my existence in this world is a mistake, is a very difficult thing to hear. But and so it's hard for the mind to accept. It's almost like we can sort of, if we say, oh, we're born from mental afflictions and karma, we're kind of okay with it in some way. But if you go directly at it and say the problem is birth itself, then the mind, very difficult for the mind to accept. We may be able to accept some extent some impermanence, to some extent sort of teachings of emptiness, but to say that the pervasive birth is a mistake, and and this and this is the sort of cause of this condition of pervasive conditioned suffering. This is very difficult to have, and I mean, I'm not just talking about all of us. I had this as well, because there was one time when I um, went down to see my teacher to ask him some questions, and he mentioned all of this to me this time when he mentioned all of this to me, and he was down in Norbalinka, which is down below Dharamsala, and my residence is up in Dharamsala, and the taxi took about an hour for me to go home. And I was I felt very, very uncomfortable, um, uh, uh, going up and contemplating these teachings. And all I wanted to do was a sort of a little bit to escape from this, to eat some food and watch a movie. But this had a strong influence on me. For about a week, I kept really feeling sort of quite uncomfortable about this, but also thinking that they really needed to, and really needed to sort of find a way to. It was very hard to accept, but it was really needed to find a way um, to approach to how to solve this problem, and so and actually find a way, because all of this is driven by the eight worldly concerns. So thinking about, really sort of started to contemplate how could it be possible to stop birth, and of course this leads us to the idea that you have to exhaust the mental karma and the mental afflictions and the karma. And in order to do that, you have to have the mind of wisdom that acts in direct opposition to the mind of self-grasping, as it engages with its object in a completely opposite way to the mind of self-grasping, and then have a trust that this wisdom will help us. And in a sense, this is also having a trust in the truth of sensation. Um, so um, um, so that's one way, sort of, to think about the way in which to cease birth from occurring. Another way which sort of helps is a kind of yoga. The way that the yogis think of is in terms of getting tired of all the sort of getting tired of the karma and mental afflictions, or the creating a sort of appearances to mind of these mistaken forms of mind overcoming us and sort of tiring us out with all of their appearances. So this is a way that the yogis also think about to help them to push them towards the process of preventing birth. Sort of putting an end to the cycle of birth. So, after this, I sort of, even if there were sort of initiations going on, I understand, of course, that initiations are very profound teachings. But what I had from inside of me is this sense that I really need to seek out these instructions on wisdom, which will help me to overcome and tame myself grasping. And so if the Kadampa masters are not famous for high tantric teachings, they're famous for teachings on bodhicitta, on impermanence, and the methods to help us to tame our self-grasping. And so they make that their main practice. So this, I think, is a wonderful approach.
총으로 당 거야 서로 지다 안을 하와도 아니 지게 되샤드리샤 아니 베나 아주 텐데 양라 주니기 나로네 아니 겨월래야 톡도 마소네 슈치슈 지네디 되샤드리 단 먼저 여기 베나 지게 겨월 유마 쳐는데 가르에서는 잡고 안을 하와도 지름이시기 럼링 치면 나올런리야 파르도 주비기 교 파르도 나랑도 두스 판로 로고에 디 가르치는 로고여스 제일 선배 파르도 계획이 주 유나면한테 직대려야 아니 지가 라버들이야 아니 배 가서를 착배 쌤 참무지 그랬어 어디 장선 참무데 가르랬어 하나 당아 매버 차도도 우세 삼로된 리지 데이트 레온데 다가랑 차고 타슈차 마매버 차로도 수도 좀 당알로 땅 모티베겠다 차고들이 마음은 저로도 세차로 어찌냐로도 당아매버 차로도 내기 당아도 발도 나로라야 플레고야게도 유조도 디도레세 무슨 나신제 당아란 종이야래 차고를 님부 된 거야 대장가 주로 멍부지기 양지가 최대 나로를 기부 용해라야 차고라야 따고자고를 차고 간롤시고 해서 지금 무슨 데도와 제장아 따디나 나와 산지비 쇼나 된대양라 중이기도 나로인도 전에 아니 다 변화 차고들이야 오타라만 뭐 치고도 저다 변화 머리 벗어로 지나 딱콜라 차고스 명대다가 말해대 다 짐바스 지지 명 토온도 전에 아니 짐바디 가르리 징기어서 말을 징기어스 아니 녜세 지기어스 마당에세 녜세 들려야돼 말을 짐바 인자 녜세야돼 슈글레 아니 어디기다 아니 진당디기 니루로 몽바 다가란 게 아니 또 상화 용 투야지다 딘데지기 몽바데 매베이나 마 짐바 이나야 아니 다기르 지금 말세도 녜세 르 땅마 토바시에 제베 니출리 게제 마시진 자원이는 먼센도 아니 로 튼튼인도 선배 가두이네요 acceptance 샘딩 나로를 용초우리 제조우리 때려와서 레드 라운칭 부시우지 톱로야지 로 고양 부시우지 차로야지 어딘데 주송도
And so in terms of the methods to prevent this sort of a cycle of uncontrollable rebirth from birth of taking place, then of course this is the karma and mental afflictions, which are the primary cause, in which we need to employ methods to help us reduce karma and mental afflictions. But out of one of the main factors out of all of this is also attachment. In the 12 links of dependent origination, the main support for a new birth is that of attachment, and the main influencing factor is attachment. And so Rimpoche mentions in one of his in the Stages of the Path text, I think that he mentions that the cause for us to be born in the bardo, in the intermediate state, why do we often need to go into the intermediate state, is actually the cause of this. Is the cause of this bardo, and is due to a very subtle mind of attachment which occurs in the when we're very close to the moment of death. And what happens to us is we have this attachment of feeling that we're going to become non-existent. This is a kind of subtlest form of attachment that, like I'm over, life is over, and there'll be no more. It'll be non-existent, and that acts as this main cause for us to be then born in the bardo, in the intermediate state between lives, and therefore we have to rely on antidotes to attachment, because of course most of the things that we do in our daily lives, in our world and daily lives, are all driven by attachment to things, and therefore to attachment to the happiness of this life. And so in the Buddhist system, we talk about the 12 links, and 12 links being driven by the first link of ignorance. But of course, that doesn't have the name of attachment given to it. We just call it grasping ignorance. But what it's doing is a kind of attached or grasping at the I, and then from grasping, a strong grasping at the I, then grasping to mine, and the stronger we are clinging to the I, the stronger we are. Stronger, we sort of have a stronger sense of mine. But of course, this ignorance is a mind which is confused in terms of the nature of the way things actually exist, and we have to sort of have first of all to have a strong sense of not wishing to sort of give ourselves into that kind of confused state of mind, and eventually to be able to accept that these things are really actually like this, that the things are actually, then that's not in accord with reality, that this is the way that things actually are. And this sense of, in our minds, this sense will bring us a tremendous sense of ease and freedom.
이제다네 코알레 주그리 아니 상계적 고방 도그리 아니 다 지기 차소 녀모 매버서 도그리세 계제되다 용라래 다양 그도 상을 땅도 전배 양 땅이 기 코야 우여되니 기 미치려야 지기 가르쳐 그래 남샤 윤도 아니 지기 심지 까니 망고 싶고 지기 se de shuchu shu chigi ngar zing lo ti do sia de won de zambe ka ni chigi chunju ji tene be chengbu shu ji tong ro ya anel hawa do ka ni chengbu shu ji ta won de ne be solo tobe solo tobe gi ani jiga be lebe ka le na ya am bo yang chigi be sem na lo le tang ma to ni da be ko chigi nga zo ma so ne chi ya 가르쳐 그래 아니 단달람 제르무치게 깨녀람도 집에 남한 용호세기 차베드 나로래야 아니 안조를 깨녀버도 줘 아니 지기 미회바 안조를 미회바지 레바 마레스 외신 참배간에 레저르지 레스 acceptance 드레 어헌 딘디지 그냥로 공식디 자야라 안 동반 얘기 지금 삼로도 코르디니들라 니 접상 친구 유스를 베나 아다 고란조 따디 고연에면 앙굴리말라 기 남타를 지금 제외이나 아니 디나로를 야다 즉 섬지메 제병 어저징게 남타를 디나로를 야 카리오르스라나 다 안제장가 Kurang le ya chik nyeda tang che Kurang le ya be shivu chik dozub shen ani nyeda tang be ge ani dinti semla kanya nga zo ina ta jikden dina lo ta misu be lo chi shu ge to zure ta nga zo ma so ne dong dong ni ge ta be mi shiro chik yo de ina ya ta dong ani chik 좀 된 데려야 그런 공부 저걸 하고 데려야 좀 된 되게 끝이나 지 저랑 동해 도에 좀 된데 저어딘다 지나는 것도 와. 다 있는 그런 게 차니 태문절지 앙글레 말라게 야 좀된들이야. 저랑 게 두지 거든래 때네스. 저랑 게 두지 거든래 때네 앙알라 동해민도 네베 투베 흘려진 슈도. 나딩아 주주간에 지 코믹 주어르데. 코믹도 코믹이 백업이 아니 네 셈나라 더와 가르스네 Gola masu tene people apigna tishe yorba dan gola masu jaba de deva chama mare ni be koran be chig yorba da be neba cha de be lagba da kangba chama do se teje 좀된 데를 연구해 지 tishe yore 난 거 초아 쇼시면 쇼제지 근데 르르 나서 쉬우지 되대 단데 나서 민도 동해 민도 선 카르세나 삼네 더버사기요 재장가 그런 게 좀된 데를 쉬우가냐 걔랑 그 도지 거든 때제 알아 농해민도 쉬되자면 다디 가르치게나 삼 이완라지 초 얘네 디 된다 가르치기 하고요 말에 슈마 얘기 이제 백가베야 우메기 아니 비지든데 난 차베쇼라 아니 다단다 그리즘바 세게 우메기 슈나나 마도 손도 선배 신에 세면장왕 류주디야 자나 송게 한 세면장왕이야 아니 미 동제 아니 마차 단도 좀 된데래 네좀 된데 저런 농엔 누구의 수를 농해민도 수업에 가봐야 다 르르 동해 여봐다 자네 자타 말세 이내 르르 동해 여네 아 동해 치셔도 수치 것은 생기치 거 네, 세야 되게 되게 체원도 전에 동해를 야 다길 치냐 매되지 동해 르르 동해 여네 딜라 다길 치냐데 네, 세야 수치 뭐 가져요나 텔라 동해 수치야요 대는 좀 동해를 다길 치냐 그 로드 수치 뭐 매도 전에 아니 동해 민두스 생기 동해 매도 전에 르르 동해 가져요나 sem 동해 민두스에 깨졌디 아 아주 지기 캐도 밥에 깨졌지도 요초를 그냥 안 줄래도가 여러봐 답변나 단다 차와 슈슈 쉬고 때문에 가라 하시베 최년 배고 가도 쉬어도 좀 뭔가 티고 답디 단다래데 배 섬나나 가와시고 검진이 하도 전에 간년도 르르 간년도 돼 이제 심지고 쉬어도 전에 이 간년면도 세서도시 아 양 알아주 지딩긴 예저 슈슈부치는 뭐 슈부지 라자 첨부지 여대위나 양고 니마 강 내가 지는 배니 쇼게 주주 숨바절랑 광다 주주 주가 주지마다 녀야 말아 니마 지를 주정아 동마다 녀야 말아네 뭐 여고 슈부지라고 여는 계산 첨부라거든 양초랑 뮤직 기블도 좀 아주 슈도스 가르치는 사람 그 삼로 나나 룰루 동네요 룰루 동네인데 다기르치요 말봐 어쨌든 딘디기 캡상주의도 전에 신의 단다 지게 담에 통배 로 담에 통배 로 되게 말한 좀 동해망 보지 다기리 친야 때도 그 양로 당겨요 인자 디 캡상 첨부진도 앙글리 말라게 남다디야 배 심도 편부요 어디 단다데 최지 쉬비
And so, here in terms of uh, seeking out advice in terms of the uh, mental affliction, in terms of the advice to sort of seeing the advantages of trying to get rid of the self-grasping, and seeing the qualities of understand, seeing the benefits of understanding the lack of intrinsic nature of things, and in terms of we have to sort of understand the many difficulties that, in order to attain liberation from samsara, we have to understand this entire process of the mental afflictions and karma, particularly of attachment, and and we have to sort of direct our thinking to understanding the many difficulties that come to us from grasping at an I. So, for instance, we can see in a sort of very manifest way that if we have a strong clinging to the I, then it's very easy for us to make in our minds to make something which is indeed just a small difficulty. We can make it in our minds such a much bigger thing, and it is very hard for us to easily let things go when we have this very strong sense of the I. So it's in there's a text by Lama Tsongkhapa called "Taking Difficult Conditions or Taking Suffering into the Path," and so we have to sort of habituate ourselves to. In that text, what it says is that the first stage before we actually take the sort of difficulties and unconducive conditions into the path is to first of all accept the suffering. So we're instructed to be able to accept it first of all. We have to habituate ourselves to understanding suffering and being able to accept it first. And this helps us. This gives us an advantage. To be able to deal with our suffering. So there's some of you may have heard this, some of the biography of Angulimala, and who has obviously committed many terrible acts, and he was surrounded by many of the people that he had harmed and was beaten terribly, and he was it was blood, all blood everywhere. He had sort of broken arms or legs, or his body was completely broken. And at that time the Buddha came to him, and I think the Buddha came to him, and the Buddha asked him a question. He said, "Do you have suffering?" And due to some sort of conditions there, Angulimala said, "No, because of your kindness to me, I don't have suffering." So this was a very I remember when I was very young, I used to love comics, and in the comic is a very graphic. I read a comic of this story of Angulimala, and there was a very sort of graphic pictures of him beaten with his wounds and blood, and tremendous. Obviously, his body was kind of sort of broken, and this tremendous, and then I was very sort of intrigued by him saying that did you have his Buddha asking him, do you have suffering? And he said, I don't have suffering. So of course his body must have been suffering, but he's saying, but he was responding, I don't have suffering. So I had a doubt about this, and saying to the Buddha, because of your kindness I don't have suffering. And when I was receiving teachings from one of my teachers on my Dharmaka on the middle way, in terms of this, I mentioned this thought about why somebody could be having tremendous physical suffering, but not be suffering mentally, and this connects to, of course, to the topic of grasping, that with very strong. Particularly clinging to mind, the strong grasping to the I, but then on the basis of that strong grasping to the I, grasping to the mind. So, with a very strong mind grasping to mind, then if we suffer difficult physical conditions, then we will, also suffer greatly mentally. But if you are able to reduce your clinging to the self and therefore clinging to mind, then even though you may suffer tremendous physical difficulties, you may not need to suffer mental suffering. So we can see this in the world where people even listening to Dharma teachings, sweltering in the heat, and yet their minds can be very happy. Or also you can see it in the world where people, for instance, get up at incredibly early hours in the morning, go out to work and come back late at night and only sleep a few hours a night, and they may be doing it for the purpose of attaining wealth, but if you ask them, are you suffering, they say, we're not suffering that much. So the happiness, the mental happiness It doesn't have to rely on the physical. It's not necessarily disturbed by the physical sufferings. We can see this even in ordinary life. So this connects with the. I think this story of Angulimala was extremely beneficial for us.
다 세지 도시지 아란주기 코랑경에도 예되니까 삼로지 예대비 슈라 가도 있네양 꼭 딜라딜은 딜라데네 다기르치야지다 딜라데네 주미 이지 남도 좋다 딜라데네 샤소녀 뭐 끼기 여바데 배 자는 자 담발이야 이지지니에 토네 네다 우메 따와데 세상가 가도 있네 아니 다 신예디 랑신 가르레 코랑경 오멍오마 가르레스 디야 오제 제지 마추나 가두이는 로 추바지 게요나 가두이는 요모지 게게베디 그래 시디점베 다디 로 추바디 메바스에게 탑실라 아니 세상 오메게 따와도 실내 거야지 아니 하와도 가상게 아주 여기 다지게 가신 곳 위원회를 매내를 직년제도 대대야디 가르스나 다 가자 가르까 하고 나 세녀디 아주 나 까베 된 말이 나로 추벌 삼로다지 로 추베기 몰라야 도시 샤르데 세 완전 좋다고요 니 간에서 매번 쓰고요 시도 좀 뱉더니 다 단다 오마 튕겨베게 따와라 가서 그냥 공부응외네 시지 그뒤에 로지 샤리아 고급지라고 유나 니 자원이는 너버리 니 까고야 돼 당하전 차소 요모 탐지 텔레티니 기구여베 인자 안디 가야게 다시 연주 준비를 가서 아니 공부라 공부리야 아니 강사스 지제 명다단데 가데스 따버렸으나 난 다들 류도 따봤나신 따봤 잠시리 또배 봐 따봤 잠시리 마도 유코랑게 뇌네 강사스인데 루베 자원이는 요 말에시 다 삼로들 내용들 아니 신이 가시리 년도 요 말에 다 가시기 가르치고 그러시네 헬렌체 아 디베 짐벌이 쉬우지 내용도 잠베 아니 신의 디자친부 쉬우지는 곰디 곰자고 곰디 때문에 아니 생그 소리지 나는 갈리고 왔어도 잠베 다 쉬었다면 코랑경에 뭐도 샤다레 샤 세가 삼로들로 곰디 쉬우지 때문에 아니 쉬었다면 도 산대용하라는 게 코랑경에 매나야 도 산대용 지기 자와체가 통화한테도 담지 가려서 알로 추병 오잠실 마도 지금 코랑경에 요 말에 신에는 삼마당 되니 유튜브 잠베 신에 아니 단다 저름부시기다 아니 더와도 바덴 다와 타베기 가정 원징이 제술이야 아니 슈견치 프레젠테이션 데 가르나머스도 근데 니게 남셔야 돼 하고 나마도 야냐가 전부여다 시제 애는 되니게 남셔야 되다 도수 충분해 다디 참대 샤제 안 사면 기타 디제 고급레
And so, in relation to this, this relation to the strong sense of mind, the strong clinging to mind arising in relation to the strong clinging to a self, then and while this is going on, then it's impossible for us to get rid of our suffering. But in the Buddhist teachings, then we talk about how the self, the I, doesn't exist from its own side. Whatever phenomena we take, none of those phenomena exist at all from their own side. The self doesn't exist at all from its own side. But if we don't understand this, then with this strong clinging to I, and then strong clinging to mine, and then we get what is called an inappropriate attention or inaccurate engagement with the object, and then the poisons of the mental affections such as attachment and anger arise. But from the Madhyamaka perspective and point of view, what we are trying to do is to look at what is the real, asking the question, what is the real nature of things? What is the actual real situation of phenomena, and then looking to starting to understand through that presentation of the Madhyamaka way of seeing things, by hearing the teachings and looking at things, that we start to understand that these are all that we've mentioned here are all mistaken forms of mind, and then we have to start thinking about what is the, so if this self is is perceived by a mistaken sense of mistaken mind, what is the object of negation in relation to the self? What is the and that we understand that these mistaken forms of mind are, from the perspective of a mistaken forms of mind, they have its superimposed aspects of the self which are not there. So we're not actually refuting the self completely. We're refuting superimposed aspects of the self. That things don't exist from the self, doesn't exist from the side of the aggregates, and to think that it exists from the sides of the aggregates is a completely mistaken kind of mind, which gives rise to all our mental afflictions. So this perspective we have to hold, and so in terms of thinking about the way that the person, how is a person exist in relation to the aggregates, then we have to think using this example of the way in which a snake is sort of designated, imputed to a striped robe, and that there's actually nothing from the side of the striped robe at all. There's no snake from the side of the striped robe at all. So this is, we should think of the way that the self as being imputed on the aggregates, just like that. So for some people, this is very difficult to hear, of course, but some are able to accept it and slowly to sort of develop, become familiar with it, to cultivate a familiarity with it, of this understanding that all things do not exist from their own side, and that everything, things do not exist from their own side, and yet they're still able to function. And so, therefore, all of those other forms of mind are mistaken forms of mind, and therefore, we need to be very clear that what Lama Tsongkhapa and, of course, Chandrakirti is doing in this text is to help us to clearly and definitively identify the object of negation. And for that, Chandrakirti and Lama Tsongkhapa are saying to us that it's essential that we understand the presentation of the two truths in order to be able to understand clearly what the object of negation is. So we're not, yeah. So I'm going to speak for a little bit. Hello. I know. I'm quite concerned to reveal my. I'm realizing that I think they can now get people can see me on Zoom. It is. I don't like that. Oh. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, it's okay. Okay. Yeah, 1, 2, 3. Yeah. That's probably difficult for you, isn't it? Yeah, you okay? Better. Yeah, maybe some they can't. Yeah. Some people can listen directly. Yeah, I think they'll get the English, but that's all right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because they have to listen on their headphones. The French,
Oh.
because they're not going to put the French in the room. Yeah. Okay. Hi. um, so Rimshi asked me to speak a little bit about, I suppose, about my life history or something like that. How I, because I had studied and spent a bit of time studying in Dharamsala, and so he asked me to talk about a little bit about my life history and that kind of thing. And then to talk about the things that I've found in my process of my studies and the things which I felt were important within the Dharma, that kind of thing. But first of all, he also told me to talk a bit about my complicated life history. So, um, so I was born in England, in a city called Bristol in England, which is in the south of England, and I studied ecology in college. I was quite interested in the environmental world and doing. From quite young, I had quite an interest in that. I had an interest in philosophy as well, but not in a not in the way that people like Alex did it. But I was kind of interested in a little bit in Asia and Asian philosophy, and but also in sort of I worked for the Green Party for a while. I studied ecology. I worked for the Green Party for a while and worked in environmental conservation, doing projects with young people to sort of in quite poor areas of England to help them to sort of, create some connection with the environment, that kind of thing. But I had a kind of interest in Asia and kind of the Tibetans a little bit and India. I remember I was back there recently. There's one area of England called Exmoor, which is kind of a moorland. There's quite a lot of moorland in England. These sort of no trees and stuff. And I remember being there, and then one day when I was about 15 or something, I went to have my hair cut in a barber shop, and there was a photo album, a beautiful photo album about Tibet, and it had these landscapes which I was kind of very resonant with because it had these sort of landscapes with, very few trees and, it's not vast expanse in England, but, these kind of landscapes. So I sort of developed a little bit of interest in, sort of, Asia and Tibet a little bit. And then I think I was about 16 or 17. I read this quite famous book called The Snow Leopard by an American author called Peter Mattison, which is a book about, he was a Zen Buddhist, and he traveled in an area called Zopa, which is in the north of Nepal, to a place called the Crystal Mountain. It was all very exciting. And yes, sort of, but he was a Zen Buddhist, and I felt a very strong resonance with the sort of some of the sort of teachings and quotes and things that were in that book. So I sort of had this, kind of a little bit interest in Asia, and but I suffered, as maybe some people can understand themselves. I suffered from quite a strong alcoholic habit, and used to smoke a lot of weed and drink a lot. I mean, I was a very quite serious alcoholic. I used to wake up on the side of the road and, wake up and not know where I was or what had happened, this kind of thing, for quite a long time, for about 10 years. And just, I mean, I smoked a lot of weed, and I was still in this condition when I finally decided to travel to India when I was 28. But I had a connection a little bit with the Tibetans, and I had an interest in His Holiness. But I was still Rapsi. I wasn't a nasty person, if you know what I mean. But I suffered from these addictions, and so I was still a bit like that when I came to India. But I taught in a Tibetan school in Kathmandu in 1994. In 1994, I traveled to India and Tibet for the first time. I'd never been to Asia, and I taught in a Tibetan school and went to Ladakh, and all of the places I traveled was kind of connected with Tibet. And then in that summer, I traveled in Tibet on my own. 1994, they actually opened up to Tibet to single travelers for the first time. And I managed to get a Chinese visa in Kathmandu and hitchhiked across Tibet to Kailash on the trucks, on these trucks called the Dongfeng trucks, which was an incredible experience. I was on my own, like carrying, like, I was a vegetarian carrying like 20, 30 kg of vegetarian food across the Tibetan plateau. It was it was an incredible experience. And then back to Lhasa and, going in the Patala, and it's quite that's quite quite an emotional experience, I think. Just so I sort of, but I hadn't really met anybody. Hadn't really met any teachings, these kind of external things, and then I was in Goa, carrying on with my weed habit, and I met two Tibetan old ladies who were selling stuff in Anjuna flea market in Goa. Some people may know that. And they said, I'd heard about His Holiness giving Kalachakra in the mountains in the summer, but I was not unable to make it. And I heard about it. So they told me where it was, which was actually the place where Rimpoche, his monastery, Ganden Monastery, is there in this settlement called Mungkot Settlement. And I sort of they described how to get there, and I took the bus and kind of landed at 3:00 in the morning in the middle of I didn't know where I was. I sat and slept on the concrete on a little lungi, little cloth, and then walked up the road, and His Holiness was there like that, teaching Kalachakra. So I was like quite enthused by that, because I had a kind of transformative experience, I think you can say. And I was sort of, quite overwhelmed by that, because I was just sat in a cornfield. I don't know were you there, Alex? No, Rimpoche would have been there for sure. I didn't know anybody or anything. I was just, I wasn't in the Buddhist world at all, but, sat in a cornfield, in a hot cornfield in Camp 3 in Mungkot, and there's this person sat on the throne, you're giving these teachings. I mean, that's all. I didn't know anything, right? And then there was a person called Barry Bryant who was giving review sessions in the nunnery there. So I mean, I just literally knew nothing about any of this stuff at all. And he said, I asked him if there was somebody I was quite interested, and he said, can you give me the number of somebody who, no, not the number, the name of somebody who I could follow this up with. So he wrote 2 names on a piece of paper, and one of them was Geshe Sonam Rinchen at the library in Dharamsala, and the other one was who became sort of one of my primary teachers. I mean, I didn't know who they were. I had this name on a piece of paper, and when everybody had left, I cycled up to Drepung Monastery, because he lived in Drepung Monastery, I was told. I cycled up the road to Drepung, was sort of showing people who had no idea who this person was. And it turned out to be a teacher called Gen Lobsang Nima, who was the 100th Ganden Trooper of the Glupa system. So I sort of walked in, didn't know, no idea what you do, and he was there. Like, it was like, you're here. I'm like, yeah, okay. This is a very odd feeling, like you sat there waiting. So he told me to come back, gave me some teaching. And then I went back to England to kind of decode this experience, because it's totally out of my world. I didn't know what was going on, really. I don't think my parents knew what was going on. I was quite sort of enthused. And then slowly I sort of started to come back. I used to go back to Mungkot to see Tri Rimpoche, Ganden Tri Rimpoche, Trisa Rimpoche Lobsang Nima, and also to visit the library in Dharamsala, and start to, take some teachings. But one of the big factors was that sort of encounter with His Holiness. I didn't meet him personally, but that encounter with His Holiness, I managed to stop drinking and smoking weed, I think, within 6 months. And so I gave it all up and never started again. So that was a very, so it's kind of a little bit complicated coming from that kind of world into this kind of world. It's, it's kind of quite a transition. I wasn't a great scholar, and I wasn't, I didn't, I have a little bit of intelligence, but I wasn't hardworking, and I wasn't. If you listen to Alex and the way he talks about it, he doesn't waste a moment. I wasted half my life, so I don't come from that environment. I had a good family, but I don't mean that. I had a good family. It's not that, but so it's quite a transition to sort of. I think it's always quite a transition to get out of that kind of world and coming into this world. I think this world, the sort of Buddhist world, was, I had to learn a lot of things, that my ego didn't want to learn. You have to, if you want to study these texts, you have to work hard. It's not, and I'm not a person who naturally works hard. I have a little bit, I'm quite intelligent, but I have a very lazy habit. And so I'm not shaking on that. I don't believe it for a moment. So, sort of quite complicated, that creates a quite complicated background because they have all these things to work through, right? There are causes and conditions for that kind of thing. There are reasons why I was like that, but I had to learn those reasons and I had to try and do something about correcting them. And not all of that is manifestly found in the Buddhist teachings. There's some of that stuff I dealt with therapy and various things. I had an extremely good therapist in England. And she always described that process. She was a Buddhist, but always described that process of getting rid of some of this junk as a way of sort of, if you're traveling on a road and there are lots of rocks and obstacles in the way, then the therapy could be a way in which you can get rid of the rocks, but it's not the road. The road is the practices that lead you to liberation kind of thing, or to, but these things can get in the way sometimes. And sometimes there are these techniques which can be useful in certain contexts to help people to get some of the junk out of the way. If you're not someone who is, supremely concentrated or, whatever, suffering from these things. So then I kept coming and going a bit, and then Sri Rinpoche said to me, "You need to learn Tibetan," which I wasn't particularly enthused about, but kind of. I had a very strong connection with Sri Rinpoche, and even though he often asked me to do things that I didn't really want to do inside, but I would do them. And so I started learning Tibetan. I went to Taiwan, lived in Taiwan for 2 or 3 years to get some money because I, needed to support myself. So worked teaching English, then came back, started studying language. And then I lived in Drepung Monastery for about 3 or 4 years. And at that time, there were a few foreigners would come and go. Some people would stay a bit of time. There are a few people studying there, but not many. So it's quite an, isolated world, and I wasn't a monk. And I've never really had a strong desire to become ordained. So I was sort of living there, and I was studying things, and Trisa Rinpoche was teaching me Shantideva a little bit, but I didn't speak very good Tibetan, so we also used a translator sometimes. And slowly, just at the point when my Tibetan got good enough to start really understanding what he said, he got quite ill, I think around 2004, and he passed away in 2007. But he then, so at one point he just cornered me and said, "What are you doing here? You can't," because I tried to go and start debating in the monastery, but as a layperson, occasionally they'd let lay people go to the big churs, Ganden, Drepung, Sera. Occasionally people could go. But there was a complication at that time, and it was not very suitable for them to allow a layperson to go. And I was doing Hitchi, the sort of the classes with Gen Wong Chen and Gen Pelton Drapa. So they're tremendous masters in Drapung, what are considered the two great contemporary. They were the two great contemporary sort of teachers on the text. Obviously there are the great, meditators. My teacher Trisa Lobsam Nima, when he passed away, he remained in Tukdam in this clear light meditation for 18 days in the middle of, I don't know, it was April or something. No, it wasn't April. It was, I can't remember which month it was. It was hot. And he was in, not I mean, it was like a perfumed air in his room. We brought him he died in Hubli Hospital. And when they go into these states of meditation, you're supposed to not really even touch the body. We had no choice because he was in a hospital and they wanted to discharge him because he's dead. I said, he's not dead. I said, he's dead. Oh, no, he's not dead. So we had to discharge him from the hospital, put him in an ambulance, and we drove this road from Hubli to Mongkot on this back road. It's like a bone shaking road. I mean, it's incredible, and got him. It took about 3 hours to get back because the ambulance couldn't go too fast. We got Rinpoche back and got him in his room. He was lying flat. He wasn't in meditation, but he was undisturbed by that. And so, I was very, very fortunate to have contact with such a person. But he just sort of, before he passed away, he said to me, "What are you going to do? You're not a monk. You either become a monk and start studying in Drepung, or why don't you have an interest in philosophy and debate? So why don't you go up to, if not go up to Dharamsala and study at the Institute of Buddhist Dialectics, which is later where Rinpoche studied Madhyamaka, and where I probably first met Rinpoche. I met you when you were very young, but that doesn't count. Yeah. It was about one of my teachers from England took us, Geshe Damshu Yunten. His teachers were Ling Rinpoche, Tijan Rinpoche, Serkong Rinpoche, and he would take us around when the groups would come for his Holiness teachings in Mongkot. He would take us around. So I remember reaching Rinpoche when he was much smaller, but we met more manifestly in the Institute Buddhist Dialectics. So I went up there. My Tibetan was reasonably good, and I went up there and joined the dialectic school. I also didn't really want to do that, and I had an interest in philosophy, but I'm quite lazy, so I knew what it would take. So, but he kind of forced me again, and as always, as I've always found, usually with my teachers, that when you look back, sometimes you maybe have some resistance to some of the things that they say, but looking back, my experience has always been that those have been the best decisions of my life. So I was very fortunate, and so I studied in dialectic school for 16 years. So they do basically a traditional curriculum similar to the monasteries. They follow a curriculum similar to Drepung's text, which is Penchen Sonam Drapa, which is a set of sort of what we call Yiksha texts, which are commentaries on the great texts such as Pramanavartaka, Madhyamaka, Abhidharma, Prajna Paramita, and then, of course, for the monastics, Vinaya. So the problem is similar in the dialectic school, but the dialectic school allows people the Institute of Buddhist Dialectics allows people who are not monastic to join. So, so that was, sort of suited. It was very good for me. And also at that time, one of my main teachers at the dialectic school was a teacher called Gen Tenzin Gyurme. When Rinpoche is referring to, he says Gen sometimes on my teacher, he's often referring to, is one of Rinpoche's main teachers, Gen Tenzin Gyurme, who was a student at IBD, came from a Nyingma family, and had a very strong connection with Nyingma studies, but has developed a tremendous appreciation of all the traditions, a sort of non-sectarian view of all the traditions. And he was our main teacher for 4 years in Prajna Paramita and 3 years in Madhyamaka. And then he had this it totally suited me, because I know some of the students in my class didn't like it very much, because he wanted us to, when you're studying a text like Entering the Middle Way, he didn't want us to just focus on one textbook, like from one of the monasteries, like Drepung Losling or Chugyi Jetson from Sarah J, or Jayan Sheba from Gomang. and he didn't want us to just study Galupa things. He didn't want, so in terms of the commentary that sometimes Rinpoche is using is called the Illuminating the Intent from Lama Tsongkhapa. That's one perspective on what Chandrakirti is saying, right? Because Chandrakirti has got these root verses are, we can say in some sense, they're not clear, they're not exact, you can make many interpretations of those verses as people. If they were clear and it was done, there wouldn't be any commentary, so the commentaries are providing different perspectives, are opening up these verses, which can be very short, terse, and difficult to understand. It's hard to understand the deeper meaning. So the different traditions have different presentations, and they don't always, doesn't look like on the surface like they're agreeing to, they're presenting different things, and they debate with each other, and they have quite fierce debates at times. But Gen Tenzin Gyurme had this incredible way, which meant a lot of work if you were interested in it, of understanding each of the, let's say, the four main traditions of Tibetan Buddhism, Gelu, Kagyu, Sakya, Nyingma, and taking a text and trying to understand what all four of them were saying, or at least some of them. If you have particularly Gorampa, the Sakya Master Gorampa, critiques Che Rimpoche quite heavily, and there's a bit of quite strong critique. And so he would say to us, well, don't look at the text just from Che Rimpoche's perspective and say, oh, this is it, this is the absolute truth. I mean, he would tell us to, first of all, we learn that system, but he would teach us to keep a very open mind. So he'd say, okay, you sit in the middle, learn the different systems and their reasons, like the flow of reasons that go back and forth between these teachers, and you sit in the middle, not taking any side, and make a decision. Yes, take responsibility and make a decision for yourself about what do you think is being said, based on what you've heard and read, and then if at some point you take responsibility, you take your position based on what you think is the most valid, and then if some point there's a reason that disproves you let it go, make a new thesis, start it, so you sort of develop your understanding. But what it does is allows you to understand from a wide range of perspectives, and then it clarifies further what the actual question is. Say there's a verse and there's a kind of question inside of it, or but if you only see it from one perspective, sometimes it's very hard to get a more rounded perspective of what's going on. So the way he taught us was something I like, those kind of things. I like putting disparate pieces of a jigsaw together into one. And he really taught us that these views, in his perspective, these views are completely compatible, like Nyingma and Gelu and Hachu and Gelu, he's saying that, what's the phrase in Pinchen Chugin's Gompa Chikduba? Dampa. Dana. No. So if you look, in Pinchen Chugi Gelson's commentary on Mahamudra, on the Mahamudra text, where it says, if you look with your eyes, all of these different presentations come down to one single intent, one single way of thinking. So Tenzin Gyurme definitely, so it really gave, it was quite a unique thing. You don't get this a lot because most traditions will tend to focus on the root text from the Indian masters, say, or the Buddha or the Indian masters, and then their presentation. And there is a little tendency to sort of cling at that as being the absolute truth, whereas this other way sort of, I liked it, but it meant more work because you had to try and read. You had to actually try and understand the different positions, right? So some of our students were perhaps just wanted to know what, give us one and that'll be enough. We passed the exam and off we go. We're all good. So it's a very, and it totally suited me. I like that kind of thing. That's what I like to do. So that was a tremendous sense of gratitude to Gen Tenzin Gyurme for sort of giving us that. I met Rinpoche sort of more manifestly in the dialectic school when Rinpoche came to study Madhyamaka in the dialectic school. We didn't know each other so well at that time. That was me. So yeah, and then slowly Rinpoche was a group of students from one of the Lotsawa, the translation programs, asked Rinpoche to teach on Jinju, was it? Yeah. There's a sort of on Shantadeva's Way of the Bodhisattva, and there was a group of students who are starting to develop quite good Tibetan in the Lotsawa program, because to go into the Way of the Bodhisattva, Rinpoche needed someone to help with a little bit interpreting, or at least some words, so sometimes just needed some words. So a small group formed around that, and Rinpoche had finished his studies, I think. Yes, he'd finished his studies, or we'd been to Canada already, so Rinpoche already had, of course, really good English, but occasionally needed help with technical things. And I can't remember exactly how I came to that class, but I came to the class, and then Rinpoche asked me to help him a little bit with interpretation of some of the more difficult things. And then from there, sort of sometimes when the opportunity arises, travel with Rinpoche to interpret from into English, which is not an easy thing, because he speaks in there's tremendous profoundness spoken in a very quite complex way, actually. Some teachers teach in a kind of quite linear way. You kind of know exactly where it's going, but Rinpoche's it is actually quite difficult. I shouldn't say this. Well, I should just say it's quite difficult to really interpret to really capture the detail and the sort of beauty of the connection between things. Sometimes is quite difficult to capture. Some days you have bad days and you can't quite get it. But it's not an easy, I've translated for a few people. I'm not a translator. I'm a person who studied, but it's part of the job, and so I'm not a professional translator, if you know what I mean. I was a debater and stuff, but so it's not easy to capture that sometimes, to capture the beauty of that, and but also, Rinpoche's teachings resonate very much with me, because Rinpoche's that detailed way of looking into the very deep details of things, which is what my teacher Tenzin Gyalme and my other teachers have also taught me to do. So, and that's, I think, studying in that way is really. It's quite a difficult thing to do. It depends who you are. If you're a person, it's more difficult if you're not a person who is sort of naturally drawn to reason and there's a lot of reason and logic, right? There's 16 years of going to the debate courtyard in the morning, coming back, going to class, coming back. After 16 years, you're kind of like, I was actually until year 15, I was totally, but never thought of leave. You'd have a bad day and you think, I'm going to give this up. It's just too much. And then you get over it and carry on. I was in year 15, 16, I think it was. I had a teacher called Kyongharata Rinpoche. Some people will know from New York. I was very close with Kyongharata Rinpoche. And he suddenly got sick and passed away. That was May of 2022. And I was very close to him. He came to Dharamsala right before the COVID pandemic. And I was very close with him. So I organized where he was living, and I helped him every day with Khensa Rinpoche, Nicky Friedland, who some may know as the monk with the camera. He was Kyongharata Rinpoche's main attendant as a senior student of Ling Rinpoche, and he was the first Westerner ever to be appointed as the abbot of a Tibetan monastery, of Rato Monastery. So His Holiness appointed Khensa Rinpoche Nicky Friedland to be the abbot of the Tibetan monastery. So I was very close with them, and Rinpoche came to Dharamsala just before the pandemic, and then stayed in this hotel just up the road called the Dalai Hotel until he passed away in 2022. So I was very close with him, and when he passed away, it was I kind of collapsed a little bit, and it was the last year of my exams and stuff, and I really kind of first time ever, I don't want to do this anymore. It wasn't like that, but when you've done something for 16 years, and if you imagine going to the debate courtyard twice a day, 9:30 at night, coming home, it's pouring with rain, it's monsoon, and when you do the material again and again, it's not, sometimes it gets a bit boring. It's not boring overall. It's incredibly, it's just sort of transformed my life, actually. And the studies of, it sort of made, I needed a structure. I wasn't going to function without a structure. I'm not a person who functions without structure. So it's, Rimpoche now has set up this Serkong Institute, which is encouraging people now doing it in English to start encountering these great texts, such as Parsha Paramita and Madhyamaka, and also the initial topics such as mind and awareness, or mind, the way that the different states of mind work, and the basics of the collected topics, and the basis of the reasoning, and some of these connected with the Pramanavartaka, about cognition and valid cognition. So I feel that really it depends what kind of person you are. But if you're really sort of fully, engaging in sort of meditation and, these kind of things, going into retreat and stuff, and then that's one kind of way. But for us, if we are people who are going to try to study the teachings a little bit, to try to get some, to get some good basic awareness of what's really going on at in some detail, rather than Rinpoche uses these phrases a little bit in his teaching. Sometimes it's sort of, oh, well, if you just sort of accept that, or you just, no, I'm taking refuge, or, but what his teachings are stressing is the importance of really getting to the meaning of what that is, because otherwise it just kind of becomes like words. And not everyone, I'm not saying that, some people have an inner resonance, which I'm not talking about that, but some of us know, and I definitely know, that sometimes we say things, we recite things, and we don't really know, and the more we can study and get this detail, the more that infuses our ability to really, just to recite the refuge prayer. What are the three refuges? What exactly is the definitions of because Teni, the debate sort of thing, literally called Teni, literally means definitions, so it's defining things. Okay, bodhicitta, what is it? Now, if you don't know what it is, you're probably not meditating on it. You don't have to know all the intricacies of whether it's the main mind or mental factor or stuff, but you have to know the principal elements of things like that. What Rinpoche is going to do is explaining to us is, what is the object of negation? Oh, it's selflessness. Okay, self. Oh, no self. Oh, God. What does no self mean? And defining very clearly what the, what the thing, what are we talking about? So these debate, discussion, this kind of study really helps with just being clearer about things. It doesn't have to be, people sort of think of debate and these kind of studies as, it's all you're just in your head, you're just thinking all the time. But the trouble is, we need a balance, right? Because we have to know what's going on in some way. We shouldn't get caught up in endless dialectics and needless we've all had on the debate court completely useless debates. We just go around in circles with no ningbo, no essence, no flavor to it, right? That you don't want. But on the other end of the scale, we need to have clarity, what when you say the Buddha, what do you mean? What, up in the sky, the more clarity we have when we do things like sadhanas or recitations or practice or prayers, they have taste, they have a resonance with inside of us. If we're not clear about things, it's not Rinpoche said that in one part of his translation. I don't know if I expressed it very well. He said, it's not bad. It's not bad to just think about, oh, being good-hearted and not trying to harm people. And, there's nothing wrong with any of that. But if we want to understand these real essence of things like, even bodhicitta, you need to know, it's quite complex to get the practice is super hard, but even the initial understanding, you need a little bit of clarity. And when you're talking about emptiness and dependent origination, it requires tremendous precision and clarity, right? And of course, some people are not drawn to that sort of, a little bit nitpicking. It's not like that. No, it's like this. You can get like that if you're a debater and a philosopher. So then, maybe the people like myself should lighten up a bit about that. But that I think the real value of doing, and what they're trying to do with the Sekong Institute is boil down this 16 to 20 years of study into something about 4 to 5 years, isn't it? 4 years. Yeah, at the moment, 4 years. So they're, trying to, and doing it in English, so you don't have to go away and spend years learning Tibetan language. So, so that's perhaps the thing that I really came away with from, the whole process that happened to me was that, it's sort of putting together that precision, but not being like tight about, there's a way of, you'd have a sort of not Dzogchen way and talk about Dzogchen because I'm nothing about it, but that kind of bit of looseness, but having that precision also is very important, and then we know what we're talking about. And then when you meditate on it, because a lot of our meditation is going to be conceptual, it's going to be using thought, and I think sometimes in the West, we live such complex, intricate lives that thought sometimes has kind of got a bad name, But actually, these kind of processes are trying to use thought. I remember when I said to Ling Rimpoche, I went to meet him one day, and just before I was leaving, he said, "Don't think too much." Because I think I'd asked him about some personal thing. He said, "Don't think too much." And then he said, No, I mean, in terms of the Dharma, think a lot. Anything else, don't think too much. So, I mean, that's a personal instruction, but it is useful. And there's nothing wrong with thought if it's employed in a way which, held in this motivation to become a better person and to try to develop, to learn about these states of mind and then to try and develop them. So I think that from my kind of journey, that was the big thing that I learned is it is really useful to have some of that. For most people in the West engaged in the Dharma, even though we don't like, we just want to get away from it all and have peace and quiet. Like I always thought in the Zen tradition, in Japanese life, it's like so intricate and there's so many kind of subtleties to life that they didn't want to have a bunch more subtlety. Like when we talked about Huashan, I always thought like in Tibet is a vast open land, right? There's not that much going on. You probably want a quite complex form of the Dharma. But when you come from China or, these really intricate societies, maybe you just want, sort of want Zazen. You want what they call shikantaza, just sitting, just sitting. So, but I think in the West, we should not have too much of a pejorative, negative view of thinking. Using it as a tool, not getting caught up in it for ridiculous ends, but using it for positive things. So I think that was, I found that to be a really useful thing. And also this sort of non-sectarian way, which is useful in life too, seeing things it's just such a useful way of, okay, I see, yeah, that's my perspective, but then this person has it, But particularly in the Dharma, because I think the thing I'll finish with is his Holiness he used to say that his understanding of his practice of Dzogchen improved his understanding of Guru Samaja. Is that the right way around? I can't remember how he said it. His Holiness said, having received teachings, I think mainly from Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche on Dzogchen, and his engagement and practice with Dzogchen increased his understanding and wisdom in relation to Guru Samaja. So that these traditions are not in contradiction with each other, that different perspectives strengthen our own own understanding of our own position, and also create this sense of openness. There you go. That's the potted history.
Okay. Thank you, Simon. One thing about his teacher, Chisu Rinpoche, Losanyama, he's the 100th.
He's the 100th country.
Yeah, 100th country tripper. Incredible master, because of course his practice is that people like us cannot know, but one significant thing that when he passes away in that kind of condition in the Mongol, it's like super hot at that time when he passes away. Few years ago, before that, His Holiness Dalai Lama was having the Mind and Life conference. So then he said, you scientists should check whether the brain and the mind is different or not. And then he gave an example of a tuktam. The scientists were so enthusiastic to carry this research. But then His Holiness said that, and then they said, where should we test? So then His Holiness said, I don't know, we'd have to wait somebody to die. So then for a long time, nobody was doing any tuktam. So His Holiness said scientists were waiting. At that period of time, Chisu Rinpoche passed away. When the news was reached, and then Delek Hospital, who has all the equipments and everything there, so they rushed to go to down south. So I think there are no planes or travel was not easy like these days. So they need to go through the train. Takes like 3 days to reach there. And then so much worry that once they reach and the Tuptang is finished. So great worry. But the Chisu Rinpoche stayed how many?
I think
18 days. Like
hot.
It's a hot as like this now. So, and then the greatest worry is like, can we carry this examination? It's not a project, just a tiny project. It's a project of between science and Buddhism. Not I call Buddhism, but religion now. The whole religion who talks about the consciousness, soul, all this. And now this is the greatest examination there. So then they successfully carried the examination. And right after the examination, then it's kind of like with the Rinpoche has a kind of his control over his body. Then it's like the examination finished. Now I leave my body. Amazing. Who does that? So even you have a control, you cannot do it. So it was amazing. Then long time we waited for the answer for what was the result of this examination, right? So then we heard from the the conversation between scientist and His Holiness after quite a few years. They said, well, from the last test, what they just found was something incredible. Normally, when the person is dead, so then they have this kind of what do we call it? This machine to check. So it is more like there won't be any kind of a signal from the brain. EEG? Okay, EEG. There won't. Normally, there won't be any kind of signal because the person is already dead. The brain shut down completely. So during this totem, this ESG, EEG, this EEG in there, it shows there's a kind of a signal 2-3 times. So which is not supposed to happen on their field, scientist field. But this happened. So they are quite, now as a scientist, they have this rule, one test is not enough. And they need to see like whether machine has a problem. Also, it's going on. And after a few took them, they found it's very common. So that's why now scientists have some difficulty to say the brain and the mind is the same or different. There's a difficulty. So this is why I just wanted to note when he talked about the his teacher. And now Simon, why today I wanted Simon to give you his biography and how he met Buddhism. What was the takeaway from his life and receiving the teachings from the masters. So he been super kind to me. Everywhere I give teaching. So then my English is because it's not my mother tongue language. That's my excuse. So and then lazy, as he said, completely lazy. And then so I time to time always need to give a teaching. I need his help. So in my past life, I had Alex. Now Alex become such a I call Alex and some other the great scholars of the West, Dharma pillars of the West. So he's doing super amazing, just sitting on a chair and with a computer. Amazing. He connects with this millions and millions of people. They're incredible. So I have now in this live Simon to translate and help me. And sometimes I tease him, if my English is not improving, that's his fault. So the main purpose, why he said I'm a lazy, he had lots of weeds and alcoholic and so on. But the most important is how he didn't let go dharma up to now. Even he has complications about all this, so much studying and then so much debating, but somehow with the guidance of his teacher, he didn't let go. So now his way of connecting and practicing is, I think he got a tremendous benefit from there, but he didn't stress that out so strongly, but I can feel that. So similarly, many in the West, people try to find a Buddhism. So first, they really don't look for the definition of what is Buddhism about, what is dharma. But they just wanted to follow Buddhism because one particular, oh, the Buddhism sounds so good, and it is going through a scientific way, and yeah, and I like it. But then end up somewhere in an environment like the institute, like here. But then if you don't start looking for a deeper level of dharma, somehow there, I call it dangerous, because you feel like it's dharma, but you are not getting the dharma. You are feeling like, yes, this is a dharma. It's more like you went to Paris and then you found like, oh, this is the Paris, and you completely forgot, or you don't have any guidance to take a picture in front of the Eiffel Tower. And people say, oh, you happen to have been to the Eiffel Tower, and it is a big sign that you have not been into Paris. Then you feel like, oh my God, right? Similarly, when you say like, I'm practicing Dharma, so it shouldn't be sound like you are following some kind of a cult, or you are following some kind of a bunch of people, what they are doing. But it's more like you need to feel the flavor. That's what he was trying to talk about. Need to feel the flavor. Once you have the flavor, even somebody's talking about pizza, you will just go, that's so good. You feel that. But if you don't feel the flavor, then even you start saying, I like it very much, then there should be a big doubt whether you are getting the right antidote or not. The main reason why Serkong Institute, that through the guidance of my teacher, with our teachers, because many of in the West is in Tibetan, even in the birthplace like Spiti, my birthplace, many people found Dharma and then spend a huge amount of practicing retreat, and then following the Guru devotion, and then so complicated subject Guru devotion, but still they follow the Guru devotion, and then lots of problems, center problem, personal problem, everything, and then they got so tired, and then they say, I cannot practice anymore. And then most saddest thing that to hear you, almost 30-40 years you spend time practicing Dharma, and then there will be a day, and there I've been noticing that, I've seen to my own eyes, heard from my own ears, saying that up to 40-50 years I wasted my life. So now these kind of people need not to become like that, not ending up this kind of situation. We need to have a good guidance. So that is why in His Holiness Dalai Lama always tells us, where is Nalanda tradition? Because Nalanda tradition is where the flavor of the Dharma is there. So that is where, because right now we are going through this tradition of Nalanda tradition, where this is like a negation of the self, and all this suffering, where it comes from, all this research. If you don't put a little bit of hard work on that, and then many people, what they feel like, oh, this is too much studying, too much thinking. Oh, I don't want to do that. And then excuses are like, I don't have a time. because you don't want to invest into that. And then similar, now I'm aging and I'm not good with debates and so on. Now the most sad part is, and then without that, and you're looking for a dharma, and most important, how much you practice dharma, this self-grasping, negative emotion not going down. And then you get another pride called, I'm a practitioner. So that kind of another problem to add on. So that is why it is very necessary. We should follow the path of a Milarepa. We should follow the path of Milarepa, but don't forget how Buddha got interest and practice Dharma, and the Milarepa start Dharma. We don't have that from the beginning. Milarepa, when he made this black magic, and then he's like completely drawn to the certainty. Yeah, certainty. Now, how much I have destroyed, how much I bring harm towards these people, and from the past life, this will know this kind of a karma, this kind of a the what I have done. There will be consequences. There must be consequences. That's more powerful. And I cannot deal with this anymore. I wanted to cease this. And then he wanted to purify that. And then with this kind of a renunciation towards samsara, he started looking for a dharma. So that's why even one big sign is when he goes to the one lama, he feel this receiving this teaching, he feel like this teaching is so good, but it's not going in here. That's there. But we don't have that. You just go to one lama, it says, so good. You go to the next lama, you say, so good. And then you sit down and ask a question, what is so good? Gone. So there's something wrong. But Milarepa and the Lama Tsongkhapa and Buddha Shakyamuni, how he started, it's already there. But we don't have that. Who gives this kind of flavor? It's the Narendra tradition. That is the foundation. All the Zopa Chenpo, Shakya Chenpo, all tantric practice can be weighed. If we don't have that, then we are just enjoying the practice, and then your real life is out there, and your Dharma life is somewhere here. And once you go away from this cushion, you left your practice on your cushion. That's the problem there. So we are not really engaging in Dharma day-to-day life. So there's always a question, how to practice Dharma in the day-to-day life. But we, like people like me and the great masters like His Holiness, day and night we give this teaching, but you don't get it. Because there is something lacking, how that you cannot connect to this. So this Narendra tradition is offering you these chances to understand. So I will talk more on that now in the next session. So I wanted to thank you, Simon, for sharing your life story, and then there are more works to continue. And he's translating for Zata Foundation. So, and not just helping me only, And yeah, so keep benefiting and keep practicing, and yeah. So
Work for me. Try, but
yeah, yeah. Oh yeah. So thank you all. Thank you, Simon. Well, okay. Thank you.
okay.